In our lesson today, I'm sharing a teaching by Saint Germain, and this is from a book that was written by beloved Godfrey, and the book is called Unveiled Mysteries. At the point where we pick up on Saint Germain's teaching is where the author, as we know him today, beloved Ascended Master Godfrey, asks Saint Germain a question, and the question he asks is this: what is true visualization? And what happens when one does visualize? And here is beloved Saint Germain's teaching on that. Saint Germain teaches us, and he says, true visualization is God's attribute and power of sight acting in the mind of man. When one consciously pictures in his mind a desire he wishes fulfilled, he is using one of the most powerful means of bringing it into his visible, tangible experience. There is much confusion and uncertainty in the minds of many concerning what actually happens when one visualizes or makes a mental picture of something he desires. No form ever came into existence anywhere in the universe unless someone had consciously held a picture of that form in his thought. For every thought contains a picture of the idea within it. Even an abstract thought has a picture of some kind, or at least a picture that is one's mental concept of it. I will give you an exercise by which one may develop conscious control and direct his visualization activities for definite accomplishment. And there are several steps to the process which every student can use at any and all times. This practice does bring visible, tangible results when really applied. And now Saint Germain is going to give us those steps that we can use to bring our visualization, or what we visualize, the plan, etc., into manifestation. And he says, the first step is to determine upon a definite plan or desire to be fulfilled. In this, see that it is constructive, honorable, and worthy of your time and effort. Be sure to examine your motive for bringing such a creation into expression. It must be honest, both toward yourself and the rest of the world, not merely to follow a whim or gratify appetites of the physical senses. Remember, there is a vast difference between use, desire, and appetite. And Saint Germain explains the use, desire, and appetite to us as follows. He says, use is the fulfilling of the great universal law of service. Desire is the expanding activity of God through which manifestation is constantly sustained and is perfection enlarging itself. Appetite is but habit established by the continued gratification of the feeling nature and is but energy focused and qualified by suggestions from the outer activity of life. And then he says, be sure that there is no lurking feeling within you that would be glad to benefit at the expense of another. A real student, and only such a one, will get the benefit out of this kind of training. That real student takes the reins into his own hands and determines to discipline and consciously control the human self. He chooses what shall or shall not be in his world. And through the process of picturing within his mind, designs and brings into manifestation a definitely determined plan of life. The second step is to state your plan in words as concisely and clearly as possible. Write this down. Thus you make a record of your desire in the outer, visible, tangible world. And I want to interject something in here. In coaching, Dream Builder Coaching, Life Coaching, we encourage students to keep a journal. And I encourage you to put that to test. As Saint Germain teaches us here, state your plan in words concisely and clearly as possible. A journal is an excellent tool for this. Write it down, and then you're making a record of it, of that desire in the outer visible and tangible world. And Saint Germain continues, he says, the third step is to close the eyes and see within your mind a mental picture of your desire or plan in its finished, perfect condition and activity. Contemplate the fact that your ability to create and see a picture within your own consciousness is God's attribute of sight acting in you. The activity of seeing and the power to create are attributes of your God self, which you know and feel is within you at all times. God's life and power are acting within your consciousness to propel into the outer world, your outer world, the picture you are seeing and feeling within yourself. Keep reminding the intellect that the ability to picture is an attribute of God, the attribute of sight. The power to feel, experience, and associate with the perfected picture is God's power. The substance used in the world without to make the form in your picture and your plan is God's pure substance. Then you must know God is the doer, the doing, and the deed of every constructive form and action that ever has been sent forth into the world of manifestation. When you thus use all the constructive processes, it is impossible for your plan not to come into your world, not to come into your visible world. And then Saint Germain continues and he says, read your desire or plan over as many times in the day as possible, and always just before retiring. Because I'm going to sleep immediately after contemplating the picture in your own mind, a full impression is left upon the human consciousness, undisturbed for a number of hours, enabling it to be recorded deeply in the outer activity and allowing the force to be generated and accumulated, which propels it into the outer experience life. In this way, you can carry any desire or picture into your consciousness as it enters the great silence in sleep. There it becomes charged by God's greatest power and activity, which is always within the heart of the great silence. Under no circumstances discuss either your desire or the fact that you are visualizing with anyone whatsoever. This is imperative. Do not talk to yourself about it out loud or even in a whisper, for you should realize that the greater the accumulation of energy generated by your visualization, by your contemplation, and feeling the reality of your picture, the quicker it will come into your outer experience. Thousands of desires, ambitions, or ideals would have manifested into the outer experience of individuals if they had not discussed them with friends or acquaintances. When you decide to definitely bring about an experience through consciously directed visualization, you become the law, and that's law with a capital L. You become the law, God, the law of the one to whom there is no opposite. Then be sure, as Saint Germain said, that there is no lurking feeling when you're doing this, that you would be glad to benefit at the expense of another. We want to strive for the perfection that beloved Saint Germain talked about in here. He continues and he says, you must make your own decision and stand back of your own decree with all your power. It means you must take an unshakable, determined stand. To do so, know and feel that it is God desiring, God feeling, God knowing, God manifesting, and God controlling everything concerning it. This is the law of the one, God and God only. Until this is fully understood, you cannot and never will get your manifestation. For the moment a human element enters, you are taking it out of God's hands. And of course, it cannot express because you are neutralizing it by the human qualities of time, space, place, and 1,001 other imaginary conditions, which God does not recognize. No one can ever know God as long as he considers a force opposed to God. For whenever he acknowledges that two forces can act, he has a resultant quality of neutralizing activity. When you have neutralization, you have no definite quality either way. You merely have nothing or no thing in your manifestation. When you acknowledge God, the One, you have only perfection manifesting instantly, for there is nothing to oppose or neutralize it, no element of time. So is it established unto you, for there is none to oppose what God decrees. Conditions can never improve for anyone until he desires perfection and stops acknowledging a power opposed to God, or that there is something either in or outside of him that can prevent God's perfection from expressing. One's very acknowledgement of a condition that is less than all of God is his deliberate choice of an imperfection. And that kind of choice is the fall of man. This is deliberate and intentional because he's free every moment to think whatsoever he chooses to think. Incidentally, it takes no more energy to think a thought or picture of perfection than it does one of imperfection. You are the creator, localized to design and create perfection in your world and place in the universe. I'm going to read that again. Saint Germain says, you are the creator, localized to design and create perfection in your world and place in the universe. If perfection and dominion are to be expressed, you must know and acknowledge only the law of the One. The One exists and controls completely everywhere in the universe. You are the self-consciousness of life, the one supreme presence of the great flame of love and light. You alone are the chooser, the decreer of the qualities and forms you wish to pour your life into, for you are the only energizer of your world and all it contains. When you think or feel, part of your life energy goes forth to sustain your creation. And if I can for a moment turn again to coaching, we in life coaching and dream builder coaching, we use so many of the principles Saint Germain teaches here. And we have a saying in coaching that says, wherever your thought or your attention goes, your energy flows. So pay attention to what you're paying attention to. And so beloved Saint Germain continues and he says, cast out of your mind then all doubt or fear of the fulfillment of that which you are picturing. Should any such thoughts or feelings, which are after all but human emanations that do not contain perfection, come to your consciousness, instantly replace them by the full acknowledgement of yourself and the world as the life of God, the One. Further than that, be completely unconcerned about it, except during the time you are visualizing. Have no set time in your mind for results, except to know there is only now, just the immediate moment. Take this discipline, use it, and you can manifest a resistless power in action that cannot and never did fail. Always remember that you are God picturing. You are God intelligence directing. You are God power propelling. It is God's, your substance being acted upon. As you realize this and contemplate the fullness of it often, everything in the universe rushes to fulfill your desire, your command, your picture, for it is all constructive and therefore agrees with the original divine plan of self-conscious life. If the human side of us really agrees to the divine plan and accepts it, there can be no such thing as delay or failure, for all energy has the inherent quality of perfection within it. And it's perfection with a capital P. It's God's perfection. And rushes to serve its creator. Perfection is the only predestination there is. As your desire or picture is constructive, you are God seeing his own plan. When God sees, it is an irrevocable decree or command to appear now. In the creation of this earth and system of worlds, God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. It did not take aeons of time to create light. That same mighty God is in you now. And when you see or speak, it is his attribute of sight and speech which is acting in you and through you. If you realize what this truly means, you can command by his full power and authority, for you are his life consciousness, and it is only the self-consciousness of your life that can command, picture, or desire a constructive and perfect plan. Every constructive plan is his plan. Therefore, you know God is acting, commanding, let this desire or plan be fulfilled now, and it is done. And then Saint Germain goes on and he teaches us a little bit about negative manifestations that stem from anxiety. When we don't immediately see results, when we're in the process of alchemically manifesting something, anxiety sometimes creeps in. So Saint Germain teaches this. He says, strange as it may seem, most negative manifestations stem from anxiety, including the awful sin of masochism. And here Saint Germain is using the term in its broad interpretation, any pleasure in being abused or dominated. And he continues, he says, since it is generally acknowledged that humanity have a desire to be happy and that they have a right to pursue happiness, we ask this question. Would it not be wise for people in all walks of life to work toward the healing of those conditions which they bring upon themselves through their own unfruitful anxieties? And I'm going to read Saint Germain's question again. Would it not be wise for people in all walks of life to work toward the healing of those conditions which they bring upon themselves through their unfruitful anxieties? Anxiety is the great warp of life. It warps perspective without producing any perceptible benefit whatsoever. Anxiety is the cause of people's tendency to hoard the goods of this world. They accumulate an oversupply of every imaginable item, and they deprive themselves of happiness by their unwarranted concerns and their unnecessary and time-consuming preparations for every eventuality. Saint Germain does go in and he says, the Ascended Masters understand that we have lawful concerns and that men and women should reasonably provide for their future. And obviously any eventualities that we in our personal experience are aware of, but we should not do it at a level of anxiety. And then Saint Germain continues, he says, you see, it is so easy for a negative ingredient to creep into our formula that we must take every possible precaution before we begin our experiments. And this is an experiment such as visualizing to manifest a plan or a desire. Without first purging ourselves of all undesirable qualities, we would find ourselves with the best of motives, amplifying our negatives instead of our positives as we proceed to employ the wondrous power of alchemy. And the ritual we did this morning is one way for us to purge ourselves of some of these undesirable qualities that we may be manifesting. And Saint Germain continues, he says, as students develop soul power, it is inevitable that they amplify their negative momentums along with the great positive qualities which they seek to manifest. It is inevitable that we will do that. For whatever is in their worlds, when they are brought into direct contact with the sacred fire, must expand even as their total consciousness expands. In some cases, the negatives completely cancel out the positives, and many times, because of earthly affinities, the additional boost of power that comes about as a result of experimentation will make a magnet out of their negatives even when they are completely involved in the divine search. So again, we go back to that, pay attention to what you're paying attention to. And then Saint Germain says, we would create in the lives of the would-be alchemists the transmutative effects that will enable them, through awareness and through dedication to the Christ spirit of living harmony, to manifest all good things under divine control. Thus shall divine grace fill the temple of the mind and heart of the alchemist and make him truly a wonder worker for God. Anxiety stems from a lack of faith in the ultimate purposes of life. The hard experiences that have come to many in childhood and in later years, creating stresses and strains and producing the fruit of bitterness, have prevented their development of that refined spirit which would enable them to shed their anxieties. In reality, the lessons Jesus taught on the Father's watchful care for man and nature should give all the understanding that will heal their insecurities, their anxiety, and their personal pain involving the mind and self. This healing is brought about through the overpowering radiance of God's loving concern for every man. And then Saint Germain continues, he says, I urge all students take into account the tender care and consideration of the universe manifest in the wondrous working of the physical body when it is not interfered with by human pollutants. And I urge that they then make an attempt throughout the coming days to heal the breach caused by their sense of separation, the separation of the individual from his true identity and hence from the Eternal One. In him, you live and move and have your being. Without him, you have neither life nor identity. And then Saint Germain, again, poses two questions for us. The first question is it wise for you to pollute the divine identity by the intrusions of self-will and self-indulgence? And he also asks, have you really given the Father a chance, or has yours been an on again, off again, vacillating attempt to realize God? There is nothing complex about the origin of the soul and its everlasting communion with him. To become as a little child, then, is to prepare the way for the greatest manifestations of alchemy. Alchemy is the exercise of a stable, God-intended control over nature, and it involves far more than men imagine. Through alchemy, the shedding of your anxieties can be accomplished, but first you must build a mountain of faith to counteract the negative thoughts of the world, which are primarily responsible for man's failures. How is this so? Each time individuals have a failure and lament it, each time they have a problem and sorrow over it, rather than commit it unto the Father, each time individuals resent their problems and see them not as a return of karma or as a test, but as an act of deity whom they defy, they are building up in their own worlds frustration, resentment, anxiety, and confusion. And these momentums draw to their own doorsteps the negative conditions of the outside world. If ever there was a secondary enemy to anxiety, it is confusion. This too can and should be healed by the fires of the Christ mind. For we know that the Christ mind is calm, yet capable of focusing the fiery energies of the Creator to overthrow evil both in the self and in society. I urge you to consider then the negative thought pools of the world with a view of disengaging your energies and your activities from involvement with the misqualified energies contained therein. And I urge you to make your God determination that you are going to clean your consciousness inside and out of all residual substance, which is there as a result of your contact with the cesspool of human consciousness. Anxiety must go. It must be replaced by faith and solemn confidence in the outworking of the divine plan. This certain knowing, I say, is a happy state. When you begin to understand fully what I mean, you will see that the developing of this confidence in the real is one of the greatest ways in which all deterrents to successful alchemy can be vanquished. In fact, all deterrents to abundant life and living can be knocked down as you cease to fight as one that beateth the air, as St. Paul once said. You were born to win, and I say this to counter the lie that man was born to lose. And if you will make this statement, I am born to win, as an act of supreme faith, it will overcome the world's consciousness of failure, a deadly weight of sin, if there ever was one. And I, at this point, want to invite all of you to repeat with me. I am born to win. I am born to win. I am born to win. And then Saint Germain continues and he says, it does not matter what problems you have faced, for even the most dire situations will yield to the mighty force field of God potency that will be built up through your practice of spiritual alchemy. But why should man draw God's energies for alchemical experimentation and creation when his own world is still full of miscreations of the mass mind and the weeds in his garden that will choke out his efforts and destroy the good fruit as well? And Saint Germain says, I do not mean that you should not continue your experiments with the cloud. And we do the Saint Germain's cloud ritual once a month. So continue with your experiments with the cloud, because there is great benefit to be had from that. So Saint Germain says, I do not mean that you should not continue your experiments with the cloud. I do mean that you should understand the duality of life and realize that anxieties must go. But in order for this to take place, you must make the conscious determination that it shall be done. And if you do, I promise you that your experiments will not be purer or more successful, will not only be purer and more successful. Sorry, let me read that again. And if you do, I promise you that your experiments will not only be purer and more successful, but also that they will produce happiness and the fruits thereof for yourself and the whole human race. Let us pray. Beloved Saint Germain, as we stand before you once again and receive your teaching, we are so grateful for all that you have bring to us, all that you have manifested, the tools that you have provided us with to allow us to clean our consciousness, to clean our work, to clean and transmute the karma, the residue of that which we have brought through lifetimes, to allow us to uplift ourselves and to also at the same time be a tool for you and the Ascended Masters to uplift mankind to a higher level so that we may all once again enjoy the joy and the happiness of entering into a golden age. Beloved Saint Germain, we are ever grateful. Beloved Father, Mother God, we are ever grateful. In the name of the Father, the Mother, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, it is done. It is so. Amen.